This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning, Rabbi Glatstein. So continuing on in the subject of the origins of the Nusach HaTfilah, which is quite a confusing subject. We spoke out the opinion of the Chassam Sofer. The opinion of the Chassam Sofer in contradistinction to the opinion of the Maggid. The Maggid was of the opinion that in our generation, or in the generations closer to the coming of the Mashiach, where if you don't know what shevet you come from, or you don't know what the Nusach of your shevet is, you should daven the Nusach of the Ari, which is considered the master key, which is considered the Nusach that opens up all the gates, despite where your soul comes from. However, the Chassam Sofer rejected such a notion. The Chassam Sofer did not entertain that this was a legitimate position, that the Arizal's Nusach somehow is the master key. Basically, the way what the Chassam Sofer explains is that historically the Ari, who was a Sephardi, wanted to demonstrate and to teach and to perfect the Nusach HaTfilah based on the Kabbalah. So being a Sephardi, he took the Nusach of the Sephardim and he cleansed it, he perfected it, he sifted it, he polished it, and he demonstrated in the Nusach of the Sephardim how it works Kabbalistically. And therefore the Chassam Sofer says as follows: if you're of Ashkenazic descent, then you can only daven one Nusach, and that is Nusach Ashkenaz. However, my Rebbe, the Chassam Sofer says, Rav Nosson Adler, and the Hafla, they happen to daven the Nusach of the Ari, and that is because, since they had such a strong knowledge of Kabbalah, and when they daven, they wanted to be able to understand how the tefillah is operating on a Kabbalistic level. Therefore, they were authorized to switch over to the Nusach of the Ari, because Nusach Ashkenaz does not have a parallel Kabbalistic polishing that the Nusach of the Sephardim has. However, says the Chassam Sofer, says the Chassam Sofer, I personally, and those like me, who are not steeped in the knowledge of Kabbalah, we daven that the tefillah should do what it was programmed to do. And therefore, says the Chassam Sofer, if you're on the level of Rav Nosson Adler and the Hafla, which I'm not, says the Chassam Sofer, then you could daven Nusach Ari. If you're just a regular Talmid Chacham like me, you should stick to Nusach Ashkenaz. That was the opinion of the Chassam Sofer. He did not buy the Svara of the Likutei Amorim. Not only that, he would not even bring it into his Kehillah. Fine. Be it as it may, last week we examined the tshuva of the Divrei Chaim, of the Sanzarav, Divrei Chaim in number 17, Chelik Beis Siman Ches, and the conclusion of the Divrei Chaim at the very end of 17, just to review, is that according to the Mishnah's Hasidim, one should stick to the Nusach of their forefathers, because probably your forefathers are davening the appropriate Nusach of their Shevet, and therefore the Balei HaTosos, Rabbeinu Ashkenazim, the early authorities, they daven Nusach Ashkenaz, because probably that is the Nusach of their Shevet. However, the Arizal was Mechadesh, that if you don't know what Shevet you belong to, then you should daven the Nusach of the Ari. Now, says the Divrei Chaim, the Arizal was not talking to regular people. When the Arizal introduced Nusach of the Ari, it was for him and Reb Chaim Vital, and for nobody else. However, the Rishonim, like Rashi and all the other Balei HaTosos, they realized that they need to continue to daven Nusach Ashkenaz. They never switched. And even when the Ari came along, the Ari never intended for anyone else to switch. However, here's the conclusion of the Divrei Chaim, the last 10 lines of 17. Basically, based on the tradition of the Hasidim, when the Baal Shem Tov was born, he was a great luminary, he was a great light. And if you want to know how the gadlus of the Baal Shem, look in the Sefer Meir Nesivim, look in the Shem Hagdolim of the Chidah, that the Baal Shem was sent to be Masake in his dar. He realized that his soul was not connected to Nusach Ashkenaz, and therefore he continued to daven chose to daven the Nusach of the Ari. And he also taught that from his time and on, and he was born in the year, I believe, 1698, or some say 1700. From his time and on, there are many souls that need to daven the Nusach of the Ari, and therefore he was Masakein to daven Nusach HaHari. And therefore we, who are the students of the Baal Shem, follow in his path. So again, is that a halachic reason to daven Nusach Sefard? Not at all. What if you're not a student of the Baal Shem? then of course you shouldn't daven Nusach of the Ari. If you pride yourself as a Talmud of the Baal Shem, well, the Baal Shem said there are many souls that their connection is through Nusach Sefard. Now, did he say it about your soul? I don't know. If you met him and he told you that, good. If you feel that that's where your soul is connected, that's the opinion of the Divrei Chaim. Again, in disagreement with the Chassam Sofer. So now, the Chassam Sofer, one of his greatest Talmidim, maybe his primary disciple, was the Maharam Shik. And the Maharam Shik, going back to number 13, now comes to defend the Chassam Sofer from the Divrei Chaim. So you say, Glatstein, the way you presented the Chassam Sofer, he doesn't need any defense from the Divrei Chaim. You're right, I don't ever claim to be objective. I only claim to say the way I feel, okay? But the Maharam Shik feels that the Chassam Sofer is being challenged, and the Maharam Shik wants to, so to speak, defend the Chassam Sofer from the attacks of the Divrei Chaim. Because one of the things that the Chassam Sofer asked was that according to the Likutei Amorim, according to the Maggid of Mezrich, that the Arizal is the master key, and if you don't know what Shevet you come from, you need to daven Nusach Sefard, then how could Rabbi Akiva be the chazan for Rabbi Eliezer? Rabbi Eliezer was a Levi, so he davened Nusach Halavim, and Rabbi Akiva davened Nusach Sefard because he's a ger, so he doesn't know what Shevet he comes from. And how could Rabbi Akiva be moitzi Rabbi Eliezer? Now, the Divrei Chaim says, what do you mean? What's the problem? The discrepancies between Nusach Sefard and Nusach Ashkenaz are so minor and so insignificant. Why couldn't Rabbi Akiva be a chazan for Rabbi Eliezer? And furthermore, even if there are discrepancies, you're definitely yotzei b'di'eved. However, the Chassam Sofer feels that according to the Chassidim will say, Ashkenaz and Sefard, they're very minor. No, Chassam Sofer tells the Chassidim, you Chassidim, you know what you really believe, or you should believe, based on what you write, that someone who davens Ashkenaz can't be moitzi someone who davens Sefard, and vice versa. But the Chassidim say back, no, we would never say such a thing. We just say it's a matter of lechatchila. And the Maharam Shik, in the beginning of his tshuvas, quotes a Chassam Sofer, who the Chassam Sofer is sort of bothered. If in fact Ashkenaz and Sefard are so different, then why did his own Rabbeim switch to Nusach Sefard? And if one who is of Ashkenaz descent, the Chassam Sofer feels should not daven Nusach Sefard, why did his own Rabbeim daven Nusach Sefard? So let's go to the fourth paragraph, at number 13, the bottom paragraph.
I didn't know that Bakfil is moitzi anybody. He just says out loud where we're holding.
Well, he's definitely moitzi mi she'enoi baki. Right, he's moitzi someone who's not proficient, and especially
has to have a mind to be moitzi.
What?
The guy who doesn't understand will have a mind, and he won't know to have a mind.
Well, there are many things that we do need a Sheikh Tzibur for. Right, he repeats Hashem Lekeichem Emes. He repeats the beginning and the end of every bracha. By the way, this is another point of interest. You know, the Rav Henkin writes that it used to be, let's say by the Sfardim, the Sheikh Tzibur says everything out loud. Right? Every word of every bracha he says out loud. By the Ashkenazim, so what's a chazan doing? What do we need a chazan for? What's he doing exactly? Yeah. I need him to say, so at least he's saying the beginning and end of every bracha out loud. That's why Rav Henkin paskins that the chazan has to be very careful to say, Baruch Atah Hashem, Go'al Yisrael, out loud. Because if he's not saying it out loud, then he's not being a chazan. Then we don't need him. Then he could sit down and we could all daven by ourselves. How can you just fade out? Baruch Atah Hashem, yeah, what? Baruch Atah Hashem, what? Oh, somebody might answer Amen. So answer Amen. The Ramah says you can answer Amen. Many of you. So, right, so there are different eitzos you could say it lower. Baruch Atah Hashem, Go'al Yisrael. But if the people can't hear you, you're not a chazan, so what are we here in the shul for? So if Henkin even wrote, they put in his tzava, that his levaya, he wants it to be announced, that a shliach tzibur has to say, Baruch Hashem Go'al Yisrael. So the shliach tzibur has a role. He's being, it's called being Paris al Shema. He's saying Kedusha, right? He's saying Kedusha. He's being moitzi the tzibur in the Indian of the word. He's just leading. Together. He's saying he's just conducting ceremonies. Yeah. That's what the Chassam Sofer seems to.
When you say, I was not here for it. When you say,
I came, yeah.
Sefard. He's talking about the Hasidic Nusach Sefard? Yeah.
Not really. No, neither. I'm talking about the Nusach of the Ari. The Nusach of the Ari was he took the Nusach of Sfardim and he made out of it Nusach Ari. So it's a purified version of Nusach of the Sfardim. The Nusach of the Chasidim, which is what we refer to as Nusach Sfard, where if you come into many shuls, you see Nusach Sfard, it's unclear if the Chassam Sofer is talking about that. I would say the Chassam Sofer is talking about that, because he's referring to what the Magid is referring to. And the Magid, L'chaira, is referring to the Nusach of the Chasidim, which is Nusach Sfard, which is somewhat close to the Nusach of the Ari. Some would say, no, the Chassam Sofer is only talking about Nusach of the Ari, which is the Kabbalistic version of the Nusach of the Sfardim, and Nusach Sfard is the Kabbalistic version of the Nusach of the Ashkenazim. Now, in that case, then, so, in other words, if we're going to differentiate between the Nusach of the Ari and the Nusach of the Hasidim, then so far nobody has said anything about the Nusach of the Hasidim. Now, in that case, it would be rather strange. So who instituted the Nusach of the Hasidim? If the Magid was talking about the Nusach of the Ari, and the Chassam Sofer was talking about the Nusach of the Ari, and Rav Nosson Adler was davening the Nusach of the Ari, and all of these Achronim are dealing with the Nusach of the Ari, then where does the Nusach of the Hasidim come from? Who made it? The Baal Shem wasn't davening it, the Magid wasn't davening it, so who started it? Who instituted it? Who legislated it? What is it? Where does it come from? So that's a very great mystery. Where does it come from? Did the Baal Shem daven Nusach Sfard, or did the Baal Shem daven Nusach of the Arizal? Okay, I sent this question to Eretz Yisrael today. What did he daven? Nusach of the Ari? Okay, so where does Nusach Sfard come from, right? I sent that question to Eretz Yisrael today because somebody sent me a question on the Shiurim that in his opinion, Chassam Sofer is only talking about the Nusach of the Ari, which he seems to only be talking about. And he even said, we'll see, Rav Moshe applies what the Chassam Sofer says to Nusach Sfard. But if you differentiate, and you say there's a difference between Nusach Ari and Nusach Sfard, who began Nusach Sfard? I don't have the answer to that question as of today. I sent that question to Eretz Yisrael this morning. I was thinking about it. So where does Nusach Sfard come from? Maybe we'll get an answer. I assume it's just what?
Variant.
Just a version of Nusach Ari. I assume it's a close version of the Nusach Ari. I don't know. Let's see the Maharam Shik. The Maharam Shik says that, quoting his Rebbe the Chassam Sofer, if you look at number 13, the bottom paragraph, Yalzeh Hishiv Maran. This is how the Chassam Sofer responded. To be'emes hatfilos Ashkenazi usfardi hein shavim. The truth is they're equal. What's in one is in the other. Whatever worlds you're rectifying in one, you're rectifying in the other. They all go up to God. How they get there, we don't know exactly, but they all get to the same destination. Just they're different signoinim. Remember the mashal Chassam Sofer gave was ein shnei neviim misnavim b'signon echad. Now, and this is going to be a point where probably you're saying like, how long are we going to do these nuschais? Well, we'll probably do at least one more week. But until now, the Chassam Sofer was saying that Arizal was what? A Sfardi. Now his last name was? Ashkenazi. His last name is Ashkenazi, which is a Sephardic name, but why is it a Sephardic name? We'll have to see. But the Maharam Shik now says slightly different than the Chassam Sofer. He doesn't want to say that Ari was a Sephardi, but Vari HaKadosh Hayamei Eretz Sephardiim. He lived in Sephardic lands, because he went from Eretz Yisrael to Egypt, right? So he lived in Sephardic lands, Kol Yemei Chayav. Therefore he revealed the secrets of Nusach Sfard. Interesting how the Maharam Shik sort of tiptoes and doesn't quite say that the Ari was a Sfardi, but rather he lived in the Sephardic lands.
What makes you a Sfardi? You lived all your life in Sephardic lands.
No.
What else do you have to have the DNA with?
If you now move to Spain, you don't become a Sfardi. You're just participating in the bull rush, but it doesn't necessarily mean you become a Sfardi. Yeah? Now let's look at the next paragraph. He says, the Magen Avram writes that Look on the 1, 2, 3, 4, the 6th line. V'hagoyin bal ha'mechaber sefer HaKadosh, divrei chayim. Hisig al divrei moran zatzal bazeh. The divrei chayim questioned the Chassam Sofer. And he writes that the Arizal was moisef many dvarim. And he changed Nusach Sefard. He changed it. In other words, the opinion of the Divrei Chaim was that Arizal made fundamental changes. However, says the Maharam Shik, I disagree with that. I disagree with that, with the Divrei Chaim's take on what the Ari did. Divrei Chaim says Arizal made major changes, fundamental changes, and says the Maharam Shik, Ve'ein ani meivin shum hasagos. I don't understand what he's talking about. Devadai ikar tefillah shel nusach Sefard hiniach Ari. The Ari did not make a fundamentally new Nusach. In other words, the Hasidim say that Arizal made a 13th Nusach, a master key. Says the Maharam Shik, that's not true. He just made minor changes. He's meyapeh, it should be yaf and tfei, and it could be v'efshir. In other words, what the Arizal did in the eyes of the Chassam Sofer and the Maharam Shik is he took the Nusach of the Sfardim and he just brushed it up. And it could be even if he was an Ashkenazi, he still maybe would have brushed it up. In other words, what if the Arizal was an Ashkenazi? Maybe he would have brushed up Nusach Ashkenaz, or no, maybe Nusach Ashkenaz is so perfect nobody would have touched it. But he says, maybe, maybe now he deals with another issue. I have a question. The Chassam Sofer says that some of his Rabbeim daven Nusach Sefard, while the other people in the shul daven Nusach Ashkenaz. Now, isn't that problematic? How could Rav Nosson Adler and the Hafla daven Nusach Sefard when the rest of the shul is davening Nusach Ashkenaz? Isn't that lois going to do? Because it's one city, it's one bezdin. How could you have the leaders davening one Nusach and the people davening another Nusach? So says the Maharam Shik, in my opinion, that's not a problem. Because the Chassam Sofer himself writes, he says, he says, venerally, I'm in the paragraph, V'zeh tam nachon, in the bottom of the paragraph, he says, the Chassam Sofer himself writes, why are the villagers, why are they allowed to advance the reading of the Megillah to the earlier Monday and Thursday, and the people in the big city are laning it on Tuesday or Wednesday? How are they allowed to do that? Isn't that lois do? So the Chassam Sofer says a chiddush. Chassam Sofer says, because if the big city dwellers were villagers, they would also advance the reading of the Megillah to Monday and Thursday. So it's not lois do. If I had your set of circumstances, I would do the same thing. Likewise, when it comes to Nusach, if I would be a Makubal like you, I would also daven Nusach Sefard. So in the world of the Chassam Sofer and the Maharam Shik, Nusach Sefard is for Makubalim, and if you're a regular person, you daven Nusach Ashkenaz, and if you're a Makubal, you daven Nusach Sefard. And it's not lois to do, because if I would be a Makubal, I would daven Nusach Sefard, and if you wouldn't be a Makubal, you would daven Nusach Ashkenaz. And that's how we get around the lois to do issue. But even though they're in the same shul. Yeah, because Chassam Sofer's principle is, if I would have your set of circumstances, I would do your thing, that's not a violation of Leishas Goy. Now if you look in the next paragraph, from Mitamza Anitama, because of this I wonder on what the Sanza Rav writes, how could the Chassam Sofer not be embarrassed to argue on the Ari? Says Maharam Shik, I don't know what he's talking about. The Ari never said you should change Nusach Sefard. In fact, the Ari writes befeirosh, you should not change to Nusach Ari. The Ari wrote black and white, you should not change to his Nusach. So I don't understand why the Divrei Chaim thinks the Chassam Sofer is arguing on the Ari. I, Maharam Shik, think the Divrei Chaim is arguing on the Ari. And as the Divrei Chaim himself said, the Ari never told people to daven his Nusach. It's only the Baal Shem in his time felt that the Neshamas needed the connection of Nusach Sefard. Now, we're going to have a little diversion. We're going to get sidetracked a little bit. And the Maharam Shik says, and don't think my Rebbe, the Chassam Sofer, didn't know Kabbalah. No, there was nobody who knew the Kabbalah and how the Tefillah works out Pi Kabbalah greater than my Rebbe, the Chassam Sofer. And then the Maharam Shik segues into an amazing exposition of Tefillah in general and how Tefillah operates al Pi Kabbalah. And this is something that it's kedai to be aware of and it's kedai to know. And that is the Maharam Shik says that his Rebbe, the Chassam Sofer, when they were in yeshiva, said over that tefillah is keneged the four worlds. We know there are four olamos. Abiyah. Abiyah stands for Atzilus, Bria, Yetzira, Asiya, right? Abiyah Rinanois. Abiyah. Atzilus is the highest of all the worlds, where the Kisei HaKavod is, where the Shechina is, and then under it is you have Olam HaBriya, which is known as the Olam HaChalos. Then you have the Olam HaYetzira, which are the Malachim, and then under it is our world, the Olam HaAsiya. So there are four worlds. And these four worlds are alluded to in Ashrei, Yoshvei, Pesecha, Oid. Ashrei, Aleph, is Olam Atzilus. Yud is Olam Yetzira. Pesecha's base is Olam Bria. Oid is Olam Asiya. And likewise, Oid Yehalelucha. You have Yud Beis, Yoshvei Pesecha, stands for the 12 Shvatim. And Ayin is the 70 souls that went down to Mitzrayim. So we have these four worlds. Ashrei is the highest world, Olam HaAtzilos. Yoshvei is the world of the Malachim, Yetzira. Beisacha is the Olam HaBriya. Oid is Olam HaAsiya. Now, this is a very beautiful yediyah to have. We spoke about this Friday. Hashem's name is Yud Kei Vav Kei. What? Next time you could come Friday to the Friday shir in the Young Israel of Kew Garden Hills. From 10 to 10:50 is the first shir in Masechta Brachos. Then 11 to 11:45 is the shir on the Haftarah of the week. So you weren't here that last week, but this coming week you could come. Anyway, we spoke out that Hashem's name Yud Kei Vav Kei could be spelled four different ways. What does that mean? It's Yud Kei Vav Kei. No. There are four permutations of the Yud Kei Vav Kei. You could spell it Yud Vav Daled. Now that's how you spell it Yud Vav Daled. Hey has three ways to spell it. Hey Aleph, Hey Yud. Right? Hey Aleph, Hey Yud. The reason is that a Hey is the letter for a woman. A woman could be in three stages. She could be having a Hey, another girl. She could be having a Yud, which is a boy, or she could be having an Aleph, which is a both, right? Or she could be having twins. There are three ways to spell a Hey. Then there's a Vav. Vav could be spelled three ways also. Vav Aleph Vav, Vav Yud Vav, Vav Vav. And then, so there are four ways to spell Yud Kei Vav Kei. The first way is Yud Vav Daled, Hey Aleph, Vav Vav, Hey Aleph. One way to spell out the Yud Kei Vav Kei is Gematria 45. One way is Gematria 52. One way is Gematria 63, Samach Gimel, and one way is Gematria 72. The 72 letter name of Hashem is spelled Yud Vav Daled, Hey and then a Yud, Vav and then a Yud and a Vav, and then a Hey and a Yud, that's equals 72. There are four parts of davening. Each part is in a different olam. Each part, there's a different spelling of the Yud Kei Vav Kei. So you have, here are the four parts. This is what the Chassam Sofer taught his Talmidim in the Pressburg Yeshiva. The first part of davening is brachos hashachar. In brachos hashachar, your soul is in this world still. And therefore the kavana is the way to spell the Yud Kei Vav Kei, Gematria Ben, 52. Then, Psukei de Zimra, that's Ma 45. That's the world of Yetzira. Then Berchos Kriya Shema, that's the world of Bria, and that's Hashem's name spelled equals 63. And then Shemana Esrei is the Olam HaAtzilos, where Hashem's name is spelled 72. Okay? Now, very important, the Chassam Sofer taught that by each world you need to be miyached the name of Hashem. That's why, right during the Berchos HaShachar, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Psukei de Zimra, right before you go to the Berchos Kriya Shema, what do? At the end of Az Yashir, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Berchos Kriya Shema, also, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Okay. Be it as it may. Atzilus, the final world. Atzilus is, so he says it's Kailel, all the worlds, and it doesn't need it. You don't need to be miyached Hashem's name. He says the fourth in the Olam Atzilus is Kailel, all the worlds, but that's why in Aleinu L'Shabeach, many add at the end, V'nemar Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. He says, L'kach Mesayim Balinu Shabecha Achar Tefillah B'Shema Yisrael. This is why Hasidim say Hoidu before Baruch She'amar. Why? Because the end of Hoidu is Va'ani B'chas L'chavatachti Yagel Libi B'shuasecha. That's Gematria 52. 52 is the permutation of the first part of davening, and therefore before they say Baruch She'amar, they want to be Maramis to 52. However, the Maharam Shik said, his Rebbe the Chassam Sofer said, you're not allowed to say Hoidu before Baruch She'amar, because that's like saying a praise without the bracha. But that's just like a sidetrack that the Chassam Sofer took to explain there are 4 parts of davening, there are 4 worlds, there are 4 Shemas, and there are 4 permutations of the Yud Kei Vav Kei. However, let's see how he what his upshot is. On page 4, the second paragraph. Amnam, the Tshuvas Divrei Chaim, Hevi Oid, in the name of the Mishnah's Chasidim, that im lo yada im benafshahu haminog shetav sa'avoisav noyach loy sheisnaig b'minog hamofchar shekiba Reb Chaim Vital. If you don't know that Nusach Ashkenaz is connecting to your soul, you should pray, you should daven the Nusach of the Ari, that the Ari taught Reb Chaim Vital. And says the Maharam Shik, I don't understand how the Mishnah's Chasidim could say this, because the Arizal himself has in the Pri-Eitz Chaim that if you're noyig Nusach Ashkenaz, you're not allowed to switch. Furthermore, says the Maharam Shik, we know there's a principle of Gedolah Chazaka. In the times of the second Beis HaMikdash, we had Kohanim who were Kohanim in Bavel, and now they come to Eretz Yisrael, and we continue to give them Truma. Why? And according to an opinion, you're even allowed to give them Truma D'Oraisa. Why allowed to give them Truma D'Oraisa? It's called Gadol Chazaka. We allow their Chazaka to continue. We allow status quo to continue. So says the Maharam Shik, came bevadai. Roi sheyoyel hachazaka shahaya arata mishevet sharoy letfilas Ashkenaz. If a kohen is allowed to eat truma d'oraisa based on chazaka, based on the fact he's always been eating truma, so we can assume he's a kohen. So if someone from Shevet Nusach Ashkenaz has been davening Nusach Ashkenaz for 1800 years, why isn't that chazaka good enough to allow the person to continue davening Nusach Ashkenaz? How could you quote the Mishnah's Chasidim as to say that if you don't know what Shevet you're from, you should switch to Nusach Sefard, the same way Kohanim continue to duchen, because they have the right to assume that they're Kohanim, so people from Shevet Nusach Ashkenaz should have the right to continue davening the Nusach of Shevet Ashkenaz because of Gadol Chazaka. Unless you say as follows, that since you're obligated to daven in a way that's going to work for your soul, so even though you have a chazaka, you're from Shevet Ashkenaz, you also have a chezkas chiyuv that you need to get your tefillah to work. So it's like a chazaka against chazaka, and you're allowed to switch. The bottom line is, says the Maharam Shik, there is a fundamental difference between the Chassam Sofer and Chasidim. That is, the Chassam Sofer holds that what if a Sfardi would daven Nusach Ashkenaz? Are you Yotzei or not Yotzei? If a Sfardi goes into an Ashkenaz shul and opens up a Nusach Ashkenaz siddur and davens, are you Yotzei or not Yotzei? You're definitely Yotzei. It's only mitzvah min hamuvchar to daven your particular tefillah. If a Ashkenazi davens Nusach Sfard, Yotzei or not, according to the Chassam Sofer? Yotzei. But, says the Maharam Shik, the Chassam Sofer feels that according to the Chasidim, if you don't know what Shevet you're from and you daven Nusach Ashkenaz, you're not Yotzei. Now the Divrei Chaim denied that. The Divrei Chaim says, no, we would never say such a thing. But the Maharam Shik says, we would say that you would say such a thing. They have very interesting machlokes. The Chasidim don't say that if you daven Nusach Ashkenaz, you're not Yotzei. The Chassam Sofer says that if the Chasidim are right, then it should come out that you're not Yotzei. Bottom line is, it seems that the Maharam Shik would hold that if you're of Ashkenazic descent, should you switch to Nusach Sefard? No. In Orach Chaim, Siman Chav Daled, the Maharam Shik seems to come out that if your father is of Ashkenazic descent and you don't eat rice on Pesach, you daven Nusach Ashkenaz. That seems to be the psak of the Maharam Shik.
What exactly?
However, that's the opinion of the Maharam Shik, again in Chilek Orach Chaim, sorry to cut you off, Siman Mem Gimel. There's another tshuva. It's not on the sheets. There's a Maharam Shik in Choshen Mishpat, Siman Chav Daled, where the Maharam Shik has a more sympathetic view toward Nusach Sefard. And that is, the Maharam Shik is dealing with a situation that in the city there's a fiery dispute. It's not on the sheet, sorry. That some people wanted to make a separate minyan. They wanted to daven Nusach Sefard, even though they're of Ashkenazic descent. And the question was raised. The Magen Avraham says that you're not allowed to switch to Nusach Sefard. The Magen Avraham writes explicitly, you can't switch to Nusach Sefard. So Maharam Shik says as follows: V'afa agav shekasav ha-Magen Avraham d'chol minhag yesh shar lamala ve'ein l'shanois mikol makom nirali mishanavshei chashka l'minhag ha'acher. Let's say I want to daven the other nusach. I get a kick out of saying v'yatzmach porkanei v'kar mishichei, or I can't take saying v'yatzmach porkanei v'kar mishichei. You have an Ashkenazi who wants to daven nusach Sefard. You have someone to daven nusach Sefard. His father daven nusach Sefard. He wants to daven nusach Ashkenaz. Says the Maharam Shik, if someone has a particular cheshek to daven the other nusach, the Magen Avraham never said you can't switch. The Magen Avraham was talking to people who don't have any particular reason to want to switch, so we tell them, keep your nusach. But let's say I want to switch. No problem, you could switch. Because the Chovos HaLevavos writes that any mitzvah or maisa that a person finds that he has a cheshek for, that mitzvah has a specific connection to your neshama. And this, says the Maharam Shik, I would like to use to explain the pasuk Me Hashem etzadei gavar kainenu v'darka yechbatz. I would think this is a very new, revolutionary concept. This is a very nouveau concept. That if you see somebody, you see your kid, chveist, he has a little bit of a different derech than you. So, but what do you mean? This is not how we did it in the Altaheim. What's this new derech you have? So Maharam Shik says you should know that anybody that's inclined to a certain path, Hashem realizes, Hashem is guiding him in that path, because Hashem understands that this person's neshama needs this particular path. Dahainu shasam Hashem Yisbarach benafshay hachefetz la'osay davar. Like the Chovos HaLevavos, let's say one guy has an inclination toward chesed, and one person has an inclination toward bikur cholim, and one person has an inclination toward chesed shalemes, and one person has an inclination towards lamdos, and one person has an inclination toward bekios. What do you mean? We do it like this. Hashem knows that this person's neshama needs X, and that person's neshama needs Y, and Hashem guides every person on their path in order for a person to have their proper rectification in this world. And therefore, says Maharam Shik, if a guy wants to daven Nusach Sefard, so let him go. Gesundheit. If someone wants to daven Nusach Ashkenaz, let him go. You're now to switch your Nusach in general, but some people have different inclinations. He says, and the Chassam Sofer says that this is not considered agudos agudos.
Is it considered to be matir neder?
Do you need to be matir neder to change your nusach? I mean, let's say a person's been davening a certain nusach, and it's not working for him. He's not feeling it. And now he wants to switch. Does he have to be matir neder? I don't know if he has to be matir neder. Did he make a neder he's going to daven this nusach? Is this nusach a mitzvah, that it's nidrei mitzvah?
It's his minhag.
It's his minhag. Maybe. I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question.
To his father. That's it.
You don't have to ask for his father. His father has no bailus over what nusach he davens.
No, it's a
Why?
Masorah.
It's very chashuv, but the father can't dictate what nusach the kid wants to daven.
Dictate, but if a child, a goat child wants to, or a yeshiva bacher wants to switch the nusach he was brought up in, I think he would be just from the father.
Okay, maybe al tzedar cheretz it's a proper thing to do, but I don't think there's any obligation. It's not kibbut of aim to daven a certain nusach. A parent doesn't have a right to say, I want you to do a mitzvah this way. That's not in the jurisdiction of a parent. Even who to marry, a parent can't say, marry this person, don't marry that person, only if it's going to be mamish, a bezoyan to the parent, like katzti b'chayai. We're going to see, we'll see what Rav Moshe writes, but do you have to be mater neder?
Like this, my father adopted daven like this, I expect you to daven this way also.
That's, that I could see a parent saying that, but I don't think a child is subject to that. And not halachically, and not, maybe al tzder cheretz, I would say it's a smart thing for the child to do, but I don't think a child has to. But what's the hanhaga tova? My hanhaga tova is I daven. Why is one nusach more of a hanhaga tova than another nusach? No, hanhaga tova is, let's say, I used to come 7 minutes early to daven. That's a hanhaga tova. If I want to stop it, I have to be matter neder. But how I daven, what nusach I daven, I have a question. Let's say I say re'ei nova anyen rivriveno. Then I realize, I don't want to say no anymore. I have to be matter neder. So now I don't want to say mehera 5 times during Shemona Esrei. I want to say it 5 less times. So I'd have to be matter neder. I don't know. I don't know the answer to the question.
When you say Shema Koleinu, you have to concentrate. The Rabbi Shalom, what kind of tefillah, what I do is all they get Shema Koleinu in the Shemona Esrei.
You just daven what's in your siddur, and Hashem will send it to the right place. Okay, the bottom line is the Maharam Shik, even though in Chelek Arachayim Mem Gimel, he would say that a son of the Bnei Ashkenaz should not switch to Bnei Sefard, but he writes in Choshen Mishmat, if someone has a particular cheshek to daven the other nusach, he is authorized to do so. So now you want to know, let's say a kid wants to switch. Does he have to ask his parent permission? Does he have to be mater neder? I believe the answer to all of the above is no and no. You don't have to be mater neder, and you don't have to ask permission. And how do I know that? Who am I? Rav Moshe writes this beferish. If you look at number 18, this is the Igros Moshe. Igros Moshe in Chelek Beis Siman Chav Daled.
18.
Number 18. So this is a very typical case because 300 years ago, every single person of Ashkenazic descent daven Nusach Ashkenaz. But 50 years ago, most Jews, I think, or a very large portion of Jewish people were davening Nusach Sefard, because Nusach Sefard spread throughout Russia, throughout Poland, throughout Hungary, and many of those who daven Nusach Ashkenaz didn't make it through the Holocaust. And most survivors of the Holocaust were from descendants of the Hasidim. There are not too many people around who are thoroughbred of Lithuanian descent. Most of us, I'm sure most of us who in the room today who are Ashkenazim, are probably 100% Hasidic blood. Yeah. Right. Right. But like we mentioned, even today, Wien, I think they may have made the move. Right, but that's a shevet, that's a special group.
There are no Wieners living there anymore. My father was a Wiener in that family.
And he davened Ashkenaz? Okay. So now we have a very usual scenario. You have survivors of the Holocaust, they daven Nusach Sefard, and they sent their children to yeshivas, and in most yeshivas, they daven Nusach Ashkenaz. So the kid is growing up in an Ashkenaz yeshiva. And now the question is, he gets married, he wants to, what Nusach should I daven? Should I daven the Nusach of my parents? Or should I daven the Nusach of my yeshiva? Your wife should daven your Nusach, actually, right? If you're lucky, okay? So that's the shaila that Moshe got. Ubedvar shavichahu mi mishpacha shal chasidim shemespalim benusach shekarnas benusach Sefard. Avam mekiven shavicha gar b'makom misham benusach Ashkenaz. The father lives in a near a shul. They daven nusach Ashkenaz. V'gam lamadata b'yaldusach l'spal benusach Ashkenaz mishum shekain lamdusham. That's what they learned. In other words, the father at least didn't tell the kid, look, you're learning in a Nusach Ashkenaz yeshiva, but I want you to daven from Nusach Sefard Siddur. The father didn't say that. The father sort of didn't want the kid to get confused, so he said, just daven whatever they daven in the yeshiva. So now here you have the kid. The father is davening Nusach Sefard. The yeshiva is davening Nusach Ashkenaz. V'ata shegadalta mesupagata ulayata mechuyev lachsa espal b'Nusach Sefard. Maybe you're obligated to revert back to your father's minhag shemaspal avicha, or do you need to continue to daven Nusach Ashkenaz? This is probably a question that almost every single yeshiva student can ask of themselves. You know, their parents, their grandparents daven Nusach Sefard, and in their yeshiva they daven Nusach Ashkenaz. So Moshe says as follows: V'hinei yodua shekol anshe Poland, Ungarin, Rusland, levad b'mekamis archoim karim v'kokis. Says Moshe, in Poland, in Hungary, in Russia, except for the faraway places, you know, in the Near East, we're all Ashkenazim, right? What? Yeah, we're all Ashkenazim. Even the Hasidim, right? 99% of the Hasidim are Ashkenazim. And until Chasidus spread a spell, kulam Nusach Ashkenaz. Achar kach eschilu Roshei Chasidim. But afterwards, the heads of the Hasidim began lahanig lispalel b'nusach acher. They started having a different nusach. Says Moshe v'nimtza she'ein lahachshev shinoi minhag ma she'eschalta lispalel nusach Ashkenaz. If you want to daven Ashkenaz, you are not changing your custom. Your father and your grandfather and your great grandfather, they daven nusach Sefard? No, they changed their minhag. They changed their minhag. You're not changing your minhag. You are maintaining your minhag. Af shavicha and 3 generations. They changed from the minhag of Rashi and the Balei Toisus and Rabbeinu Tam and the Ri and all the hundreds of the Balei Toisus of Ashkenaz and France. And why were they allowed to change? Says Moshe, beats me. I have no idea. I have no idea why they were allowed to. There is no clear reason how they were allowed to change. What do you mean? It's a master key. Says Moshe. Some Sefard didn't buy that. I'm certainly not going to buy that. What do you mean yesh oimrim? Why doesn't Moshe won't even quote who says it? Doesn't say he argues on it. He dismisses it. He nullifies it. Nusach Sefard is not a Nusach anyway. It's not a Nusach Sefard. It's not the Nusach of the Rambam. The Berei V'Advarim Nusach Ashkenaz. Nusach Sefard is Nusach Ashkenaz with a few variances, a few deviations. V'nimsa she'ein ha-nusach loy Nusach Ashkenaz v'loy Nusach Sefard. Nusach Sefard is not nishtahin, nishtaher. So you say like this. Really, Nusach Sefard is Nusach Ashkenaz. But they added words. And we know the Arizal Avram Buchach is of the opinion, and this is a famous opinion, that, and he writes this in many, many, many places, that we know that the number of words of tefillah are calculated and precise. So, and let's say, for example, there's 70 words in Kiddush, connected to 70 Umay Sa'ilam. But we know we add, we add words. So do we lose the remez? So Arizal Avram of Buchach is of the opinion that when you add words to tefillah, you don't lose the remez. Because it's 70 plus, meaning it's still connected 70. It's 78. 70 of the words are connected to 70 and the other 8 are added. You could make the case, no, when you add, you ruin it. No, the Arizal Avram says when you add, you don't ruin it. So maybe, says Rav Moshe, you'll make the case that Nusach Sefard is Nusach Ashkenaz with added words. Says Rav Moshe, I don't agree with the Arizal Avram. I don't agree. I hold when you add, you're Megareya. You can't say when there's 78 words, you get in the remez of 70. No. The klal zel loy nira ki me'ayin loy de besvara ef shaloimer zel dofam ha'maisu goreya. I'll call upon him like this. You want to daven Nusach Sefard, gesund heit. We're not going to be ma'arer. Whoever changed it, they must have had a good reason. Avo kishe'echa roitzel achzos ba'al Nusach Ashkenaz. Shu Nusach Aveiseinu v'Rabeiseinu. You're allowed to. So no problem. In other words, if you would ask for a Moshe, if someone is davening Nusach Ashkenaz, are they allowed to switch to Nusach Sefard? No. Not today. If you didn't make the switch 200 years ago, and you grew up in davening Nusach Ashkenaz, can you daven Nusach Sefard? The Hasidim say yes. The Divrei Chaim says yes. The Minchas Elazar would say yes. Rav Moshe say you can't. On the other hand, if you're davening Nusach Sefard, could you switch to Nusach Ashkenaz? The Hasidim say no. Rav Moshe says yes.
Moshe, if you daven Nusach Ashkenaz, if your side you're davening Nusach Sefard,
the Nusach of the shul. You can't daven your own Nusach. Not only that, that would be lo yisaskoi to do, to daven a different Nusach. Not only that, Rav Moshe holds, I don't know why nobody likes to follow this. If you're in a shul and they have a certain Nusach, you may not do anything that is noticeable other than the Nusach. So if you're davening a Nusach Sefard shul, so they're clapping. Oh, I'm going to show. I daven Nusach Ashkenaz. I'm going to put my head down. You know how to do that? That's lo yisaskoi to do. You have to either say, like you say Shamnu, or you make believe you're clapping, but to put your head down, or by Nusach Sefard, they put their head down right away. Nusach Ashkenaz has the much longer V'hurachim. Everybody thinks that Sefard is longer. It's not. Ashkenaz is longer by a far stretch. With all the words added in Nusach Sefard Shemona Esrei, you have 500 more words in the V'hurachim of Nusach Ashkenaz on Monday and Thursday. Thing is, people don't say all the words anyway. But the Nusach Ashkenaz Monday and Thursday, if you're davening in a Sefard shul, there's no time to say it. It's impossible to say it. So I want to stand up and say my long V'hurachim. No, you got to put your head down. You have to fall on your face and say, you can't do your own tachnun. You have to make it look like you're davening the Nusach of the shul. Further, now, anything private, you want to daven your private Shemona Esrei, you could daven your private Shemona Esrei. You could do it, now, Rav Moshe writes, an interesting chiddush. I daven Ashkenaz, I'm davening in a Sefard shul. So I'm davening for the Amud. So I'm going to daven the Nusach Sefard Nusach. What about in my private Shemona Esrei? So if I wouldn't be davening for the Amud, I would be allowed to daven my Nusach Ashkenaz Shemona Esrei. But the purpose, I have a quote, why does somebody dance for the Amud daven a silent Shemona Esrei? It's to prepare. So the worst thing you could do to prepare to daven Nusach Sefard out loud is to daven Nusach Ashkenaz privately, because then you're just going to blow it. So Rav Moshe says, then you should daven the Nusach Sefard private. But the Shevet HaLevi disagrees. The Shevet HaLevi says, nowadays that we have Sidurim, you don't need to prepare anymore. Okay, so I would personally advise most people to prepare if you wait, most people need to prepare. Kedusha out loud, you have to do the Nusach of the shul. So in other words, davening in a Sefard shul, L'masam Shav Chitma Imrim. Right? Right, Rav Moshe has a tshuva. Yes. But whatever you say quietly, in other words, if you want to daven Nusach Ashkenaz in a Sefard shul, don't get up there. Mizmar Shir, Chanukas Vaisle David. Right? In my shul, between Mincha and Marav on Friday night, they say Kegavna, I daven Nusach Ashkenaz. So when they say, I say Kegavna, and then I say quietly, B'mem Adlikin.
Say it very quickly.
Now I don't have time to say the whole thing. Right? But that's Rav Moshe's definite. Rabbi Vadi Yosef has a different take on Lois Goy to do. But that's be it as it may. Be it as it may. These are the two mahalchim in the Nuschais. The Chasidim have a concept that there's something unique about the Nusach of the Ari, that it works for people who don't know what Shiva they come from, and the Chassam Sofer views the Nusach Ari as just a polished version of Nusach of the Sfardim. And Ribbon Shem Shiv Mekabel all of our tefillos, Barachim of Ratzon, and maybe we'll have one more shir on this subject. Okay, good.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.